Okay, I want you to turn into your equation book to the section where you have one-step equation on the left side and on the right side, two-step equation. Now we're going to fill in the two-step equation part. The rules for a two-step equation are very similar to that of a one-step equation. Let's do a little comparison as we read through them. Rule number 1 in a one-step equation is isolate king variable using inverse operations. In a two-step equation, it's the very same rule. Isolate king variable using inverse operations, except in a two-step equation, you will start with addition and subtraction first. Rule number 2 in a one-step equation says do unto one side what you do to the other. Rule number 2 is the very same in a two-step equation. Do unto one side as you would do to the other, or do the same to the other side. Okay, rule number 3 in a two-step equation. There is no rule number 3 in a one-step equation, so this is where I'm going to close this side up, and we're going to pay attention over here. Rule number 3 is isolate king variable using inverse operations. This time, use multiplication and division. And then the last rule is to do the same to the other side. Okay, after you get those rules written down, go ahead and copy down the example at the bottom. The example says 17 equals 5k minus 2. Now I'm going to use these two-step equation rules up above to help me to solve this equation at the bottom. So let's go ahead and start with rule number 1. Isolate king variable using inverse operations. Start with addition and subtraction. Well, first I have to find where is king variable. I'm going to box in the right side of my equation and the left side of my equation. There's king variable. He's on the right side. So I'm going to begin on the right side and I'm going to isolate king variable using addition and subtraction first. Well, I'm going to go ahead and switch this. So I have a negative 2. How do I cancel out a negative 2? By adding 2. So I'm going to add 2 to the right side, and that's going to cancel out. And now I'm going to do rule number 2, which is do the same to the other side. And I'm going to add 2 to the other side. Now I have 19 on my left, and I still have 5k on my right. Okay, now rule number 3 says isolate king variable using inverse operations. This time use multiplication and division. Okay, so where's king variable again? King variable's on the right side. So I'm going to isolate him. This is multiplication. The inverse is division. So I'm going to divide by 5, and that cancels out. I'm going to divide this side by 5, and I get k equals 19 divided by 5 is 3, and I will have 4 left over out of 5. So 3 4/5. So k equals 3 4/5 would be my answer. And it is okay that I have a mixed number here. Okay, so let's take a look at some boards and some examples on our boards. Okay, so on this board, we have a two-step equation. We have 2m minus 3 equals negative 5. So I'm going to use Algebra Tiles to solve this. On the left side, these two rectangular tiles represent a variable, so 2m. And then I have 3 negative tiles, and on the right side, I have 5 negative tiles. So what do I need to do to isolate my variables here? Okay, first I want to isolate king variable using inverse operations, beginning with addition and subtraction. Well, since subtraction is where we start up here, I'm going to use the inverse of that. When working this out paper pencil, I would switch this. This is a negative 3. So I'm going to add 3 to cancel out that negative 3. So I'm going to add 3. 1, 2, 3. And 3 positives will cancel out those 3 negatives. So I'm going to take number 2 is to do unto the other side what I did to this one, okay? So I am going to add 3 to my right side. When I do that, 3 negatives on the right side also are going to cancel out. Okay, what that's going to look like paper pencil is going to be plus 3. I get 0 plus 3. I end up with negative 2, which is what I can see that's left on my right side in my box here. Okay, so now all I have left is 2m on the left side equals negative 2 on the right side. So now I'm going to use rule number 3 in solving a two-step equation from my equation book, which is to isolate king variable using inverse operations. Now use multiplication and division. Well, 2m means to multiply, so I'm going to divide, use the inverse of multiplication. If I divide this by 2, if I split these two variables into groups, I'm going to end up with those two separated, and then I'm going to split these into 2 groups, and that shows me that 1m equals a negative 1. So I could take this away and know that 1m equals negative 1. So divide by 2, I get m, I'll put it up here, equals a negative 1. Okay, let's do a little practice here. M divided by 2 plus 6 equals 10. So we are going to isolate king variable using inverse operations beginning with addition and subtraction. I have plus 6, so I'm going to subtract 6 to get king variable alone. That becomes 0. And I have to do unto the other side what I did to this side. 10 minus 6 is 4. So now I have m divided by 2 equals 4. Now I'm going to use inverse operations once again, but this time with multiplication and division. So m divided by 2, the inverse of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2. So times 2 times 2. M equals 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 plus 6 is 10, so it works when I try to plug it back in. Let's go to number 2. Negative r divided by 3 plus 5 equals 9. All right, isolate king variable using inverse operations, begin with addition and subtraction. Well, where's king variable? King variable is on the left side of the equal sign. I can box in my right side and my left side just so I can find where king variable is located. He's on the left side, so I am going to start with addition and subtraction. This is plus 5, so I'm going to subtract 5. And I'm going to do unto one side as I did to the other. So I'm going to subtract 5 from my right side. 9 minus 5 is 4. And I have r divided by 3 equals 4. Now I'm going to isolate king variable using inverse operations, begin with multiplication and division this time. Well, I have divided by 3, so the inverse of dividing by, and that's a negative 3, is to multiply by a negative 3. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 3 and multiply this side by a negative 3. 3 cancels out on the left, and I'm left with r, and r equals negative 12. Negative 12 divided by 3 is going to give us 4. By negative 3, excuse me, negative 12 divided by negative 3 is positive 4, plus 5 equals 9. So it works when I go back and plug it in. All right, number 3, 2/5 plus 4a equals negative 6/5. All right, rule number 1, isolate king variable using inverse operations, begin with addition and subtraction. So I have 2/5 plus 4a. So on my left side is where my king variable is. King variable is a, right here. And I am going to start by using addition or subtraction. Well, I know that 4a, this is multiplication. So I'm going to start over here with the 2/5. I can subtract 2/5 to get rid of it. That cancels out. 2/5 minus 2/5 is 0. And then I'm going to subtract 2/5 from the right side. Negative 6/5 minus 2/5, or I could switch it to plus a negative 2/5, equals a negative 8/5. So now I have 4a equals negative 8/5. Now, I am going to isolate king variable using inverse operations, multiplication and division this time. 4a is multiplication, so I'm going to use the inverse operation of multiplication, which is division. 4 divided by 4 is just 1, and I'm going to divide negative 8/5 by 4, or 4 over 1. And when you multiply and divide, you got to change mixed to improper. Well, I don't have a mixed number. Top and bottom simplify when it's multiplication. And when you divide, stay, switch, flip. I have to stay, switch division to multiplication, and flip 4 to its reciprocal, which is 1/4. So I'm just going to erase it and rewrite it. So negative 8/5 times a 4th. I can top and bottom simplify now because it's multiplication. So I have a 4 and an 8 on top, and they have a common factor, which is 4. 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 twice. I get negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and 5 times 1 is 5. So A equals negative 2/5. All right, let's go to number 4. Number 4 is 3y minus 8y equals 25. So here I have 3y minus 8y, and I have two variables. I have the 3y and the 8y. Now these are like terms though. So what I'm going to do when I can is I'm going to combine like terms whenever I can do so. Well, 3y and negative 8y can be combined together. So I'm going to first stay, switch, switch when a subtraction sign's in the middle. And if I add 3y and negative 8y, I get negative 5y equals 25. And then this is multiplication, so I'm going to use the inverse of multiplication. There actually was no addition. There was no constant term that was being added or subtracted here. These were both coefficients, and that's why I could add them together, because they were like terms. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 on both sides, and y equals negative 5. I want you to pause it right here on the screen, and I want you to try these out, and then press play, and I'll show you how to do these. All right, 2m plus 7 equals 3. Isolate king variable using inverse operations. Begin with addition and subtraction. We're going to subtract 7, and we end up with negative 4. 2m equals negative 4. And now we're going to divide by 2. We're going to divide by 2 and divide by 2 on both sides. And we get m equals negative 2. 2b minus 5 equals negative 10. Isolate king variable using inverse operations. Begin with addition and subtraction. So we have minus 5, or you could switch that to be plus a negative 5. The only way to get rid of that negative 5 is to add 5. Do unto one side as you do to the other. And negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. So I have 2b equals negative 5. Now I'm going to use the inverse operations and start with multiplication division this time. So 2b is multiplication. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get b equals negative 2 1/2. And it is okay to have a fraction or a mixed number as your answer. All right, let's go to number 3. 4 minus 2y plus 3 equals negative 9. So we're going to add our like terms together here first. I'm going to go ahead and stay, switch this. And I see that I have a 4 and a 3, and they're both constant terms. So I can add those together and get 7. So I'm going to rewrite this as 7 plus negative 2y equals negative 9. Now, I have no more like terms that I can combine, so I'm just simply going to look at it and use my rules for a two-step equation. Isolate king variable using inverse operations, begin with addition or subtraction. This 7 right here is where I'm going to start because over here is multiplication, and I'm not supposed to begin with multiplication. I'm going to subtract 7 to cancel it out, and I'm going to do the same to the other side. Negative 9 minus 7 is negative 16. Now I have negative 2y equals a negative 16. This is multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by a negative 2, divide by a negative 2, and I get y equals 8. All right, let's try number 4. Negative 2/3 m plus 3/7 equals a half. So I'm going to subtract 3/7 because rule number 1 is isolate king variable using inverse operations, begin with addition and subtraction. King variable's on the left side, and I'm adding 3/7 to king variable, so subtracting 3/7 will get rid of that. So I'm going to subtract 3/7 from the right side also. To be able to subtract 3/7 from 1/2, I have to get a common denominator. A good common denominator would be 14. 2 times 7 would give me 14, so I'm going to erase the 2. Multiplying it by 7, I'm going to get 14. And 1 times 7 will give me 7. So my new fraction is 7/14. Now, I have to multiply 3/7 by 2/2 to change my denominator to a 14. So 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 3 is 6. So I have 7/14 minus 6/14 is my new equation. So 7 minus 6 is 1/14. So I have 1/14 on the right side and negative 2/3 m on the left. Okay, so negative 2/3 m equals 1/14. Excuse me, that should be 1/14. All right, so now I'm going to isolate king variable using inverse operations, and we're going to move to multiplication division. So I have, the only thing that's left is multiplication, and the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by negative 2/3, and I'm left with m, and I'm going to divide this side by negative 2/3. Well, I remember that when I divide, the rule is to multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by a negative 2/3, I'm going to multiply by a negative 3/2, which is the reciprocal of 2/3. And when I do that, I get 1 times negative 3 is negative 3, and 14 times 2 is 28. So negative 3/28.